The answer is we have to make those cuts. He's correct that most of our spending is in these mandatory spending programs, all of these different entitlements, welfare programs that we have. That's where most of the spending is. And that's going to have to be fixed. Social Security is one of the main ones, and it's about to run out of money for the trust fund. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. That timeline has been moved up by another year since the last time we talked about it. So a few responses to Mike Johnson's video from Representative Gwen Moore. Never heard of her. Said, if Republicans have their way, they're pledging to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security next year while they give tax cuts to billionaires. They're putting your health care on the chopping block. Again. All right. I got issues with a few words in this. Your health care. You don't have a right to force other people to buy you things. So I got an issue with that word, your. We'll just have to agree to disagree on that. Tax cuts to billionaires frames it as if we have some type of revenue problem. We don't have a revenue problem. Spending has increased by like 40% since COVID, something like that. We have a spending problem. We have an inflation problem. That's what's happening. The more money they spend, the more inflation we're going to have. We don't have a revenue problem right now. And these tax cuts, really, that they're talking about is just an extension of the current tax rate that we'd already had since 2018. And so there's another issue there. Other than that, she nailed it. Totally nailed it. Senator John Hickenlooper, never heard of him, says Republicans have already taken $1 trillion out of our healthcare system. So they made some cuts with the big, beautiful bill. Now, interestingly enough, they haven't all kicked in, but they did actually make some cuts with the one big, beautiful bill and some of the payouts they're doing to the states for Medicaid and SNAP, things like that. And so some of the reimbursements to the states have been changed, and they're slated to change more, to decrease by like $1 trillion. And by the way, when they say $1 trillion, they mean over 10 years. Not like each year. And so it is the case that they may have in fact cut $100 billion out of those expenditures, and most of that's going to kick in next year as long as the next Congress doesn't do anything to change that. But yeah, some of it's kicked in. Hickenlooper says Republicans have already taken $1 trillion out of our healthcare system over 10 years. They won't stop until they dismantle it even further and take Social Security down with it. Americans pay for these programs. They should never be cut so taxpayer funds can be funneled into the pockets of Trump and the ultra wealthy. So if he's talking about taxpayer funds literally being funneled into the pockets of Trump and the ultra wealthy, then I will agree with that. The bulk of what people like this are talking about is when you steal less money from people via taxation, that's taxpayer money being funneled into their pockets, when in actuality you're actually just taking less money from them. And it's not even that they're taking less money from them, it's that they refrained from taking more money from them. That's the actual situation that we're in. And they're saying that they're going to take Social Security down with it. We're going to get to the Social Security conversation here in a second. Chuck Schumer says, thanks to Republicans' tax giveaways for billionaires, Social Security has seen the worst drop in its long-term solvency in more than 30 years. Speaker Johnson says the quiet part out loud. Republicans will cut Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare next year if they remain in control. Now, what's going on with Social Security, the first line here says, thanks to Republicans' tax giveaways for billionaires, Social Security has seen the worst drop in its long-term solvency in more than 30 years. That has nothing to do with tax cuts whatsoever. The FICA taxes, the payroll taxes, which is a separate tax from the income tax, is the same. That's the same rate. And the FICA and the SECA tax, those taxes are the same. The income tax doesn't matter because Social Security is on its own, what is like technically a closed funding loop. Money comes in via those taxes, and it's like just treat it like a separate account kind of thing. And then that goes out to people on Social Security. Now, for a long time, we had more money coming in than was going out for Social Security because we had the baby boomer generation that was still working. But what has happened is we've hit the retirement age for the baby boomer generation, and more of them are retiring. And what used to be 5 workers contributing to a retiree is now 3 workers contributing to a retiree. We've got more money going out than what's coming in. Over time, they built up what they call a trust fund. And that trust fund is being depleted because there's more money going out than is coming in. That has nothing to do with billionaire tax cuts or income tax cuts or not having a wealth tax or whatever, because the whole thing is set up on its own like little pension system kind of thing, only they're stealing it from you and you have no choice. And it's terrible. But other than that, it's kind of like a pension system kind of thing. Now he's going to bet on no one knowing that, obviously. Like, the funds for Social Security don't come from the income tax anyway. They come from taxes on your income, but it's a payroll tax. It's that separate line that says FICA on it, and you pay 6.2%, and the employer pays 6.2%, and that money goes into funding all the great entitlement Ponzi schemes that we have. Okay? So I let him know about that. Now, if you did want to actually blame anything, like on laws that were passed, then there's one thing in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is that they did this, what they called no tax on Social Security. There's still tax on Social Security. You just get like the deductions and stuff. And so for the people who got to pay taxes on their Social Security checks, they're given, I think, up to a $6,000 deduction or something for the Social Security. And technically, the taxes on those checks did go back into the Social Security fund. And so that has reduced the amount of time that we're going to have the full amount for Social Security. Okay. The other thing that they did was they had the Social Security Fairness Act, which was in the beginning of 2025. I don't remember if this was actually passed and signed before Biden left office or after Trump got into office. It was like right in December, January that this was going on, 2024 to 2025. And I should have looked it up. I don't remember who actually signed this thing. But what this did was, if you work for the government and you're paying into some type of government pension system, say you're a teacher and you're paying into a TRS or whatever, into your retirement system for being a teacher, then you don't qualify for Social Security benefits. Like, you worked your whole life, you're paying into this government pension system, and so you don't get the government pension system and Social Security. Well, they changed this at the beginning of 2025 with this new law where you can get your government pension system and you can get Social Security, even though technically you weren't even paying into Social Security because you were paying into a separate government system that whole time. And that has reduced the amount of time that we're going to have the full amount available for Social Security. And by the way, Chuck Schumer, who we're addressing right now, voted for that. And it reduced the amount of time and the amount of time that we're going to be able to pay out full benefits. And that was known at the time that it was signed. But it was a popular thing, a bipartisan thing. And I said Social Security is failing because it's a Ponzi scheme. It's basically it's just one that we know about. Like, typically like a Ponzi scheme, you don't know. In this way, we know about it. So it's not a big lie, But the people who are paying that money right now, it's not going into an account for you. It's not sitting there, little nest egg for you to take when you go to retire. It's going right out the door, just immediately out via Social Security check to someone who's currently retired and taking Social Security benefits. That's where it goes right then. Okay. And technically, as long as you have enough people working and paying those payroll taxes, then you can handle that. But we had a really big generation of people that are retiring and taking Social Security now. And we haven't had a bunch of other booming generations with tons of workers or anything like that. There's still big generations, just not as big as the baby boomer generation. And the numbers are flipped right now. There's more money going out than's coming in. That's just a fact. Like, people are upset about the fact that Mike Johnson's talking about doing something with Social Security. Literally, something has to be done with Social Security. This just has to happen. The most popular Democrat program is to take off the cap, the income cap for, the rich. They only have to pay up on the income up to $185,000 or something like that. And there's a reason that they do that, because also the payout is capped. So it's kind of supposed to function like a pension system or something like that you're paying into. And so the payout on it is capped as well. And so what they want to do is take off that cap on what they can tax, but of course keep the tax on what's going to get paid out. And that way they can extend Social Security for a few more years, essentially. It's not going to fix the problem. It's not what's going to happen. But it would extend it for a little bit. Yeah, sure. That's like their whole idea, is to kick it down the road even further. And then we'll have to talk about the same thing again, that we got more money going out than's coming in, and we got to do something about it. And that's what's going to have to happen. Rand Paul got in big trouble for saying that we're going to have to do something about it. Either the retirement age is going to have to get raised, benefits will have to be cut, or the FICA taxes, the payroll taxes will have to go up. Something's going to have to happen, literally. That's just the case. They can't even take it out of the general fund's budget, like the money for Social Security. There's no money in there, first off, just to be clear. But like, they can't even decide, we're going to borrow money to keep paying out Social Security without changing the law. They can't even do that. It operates nearly independently. So they have to change the law just to be able to borrow the money to keep paying people, and then treat it entirely like it's just a giant welfare program for old folks, which is what it will turn into. Like, they're not going to get rid of it. It's not going to happen. It should be privatized. This money should have been invested the whole time. Even the money for the trust fund should have been invested instead of just being sold out to treasuries the whole time, earning a few percent. It should have been invested. And it would have bought them another 10 or 15 years, something like that, if that would have happened. But no. Hakeem Jeffries said, the cost of living is out of control. What are Republicans focused on this week? Cutting your Social Security and giving a $70 billion blank check to ICE. House Democrats are a hell no. I just had a point of autism on this. He said giving a $70 billion blank check to ICE, as they just passed this funding. Either you can say exactly how much the funding is, or you can say that it's a blank check, but you can't say it's a blank check and tell me exactly how much the funding is. Those things don't go together. $70 billion blank check. I saw the movie Blank Check. The check was blank. You write whatever amount of money you wanted on there. Should have written the bigger amount. But yeah, that's not blank, 70 billion. So that's all I wanted to make fun of him for on that. So this is from the Washington Post. The long-standing expected shortfall for Social Security comes as demographic shifts driven by a large generation of retiring baby boomers and declining birth rates mean there are fewer workers paying into the system for every beneficiary drawing for it. An increase in retirement benefits for government and public sector workers that took effect last year has also been expected to hasten the trust fund's depletion. Another thing is, by law, they have to give cost of living adjustments. So they have to take the inflation rate into account. There was a massive adjustment made in 2023, I believe, after all the Biden inflation that happened. And so that sped up the decline. There is a common misnomer that when the trust fund is depleted, it will be completely bankrupt and have no money left to pay retirees. Money will continue to come into the fund on a regular basis via payroll taxes, but at a lower threshold than current benefits, which would result in retirees receiving smaller checks from the government. And that is true as well. Like, just so you guys know, I think all you guys listening already know this, but it doesn't mean the checks stop at the end of 2032. If nothing changes at all, basically they can only pay out the amount that's coming in. And there's still something like 80% of the money is coming in still. So they can pay that out. And that will decline over time. They could still do that. They just won't be able to pay out the full benefits. If nothing changes, they're going to do something. Like, most likely they're going to raise payroll taxes on people. Like, that'll be the easiest first thing they're going to go for. I think they will probably take the cap off of the income threshold. And that way, rich people will end up having to pay in that payroll tax on all the money that they're making instead of having that cap at $185,000. I think that's what's going to happen too. And they might decide to gradually increase the retirement age by just a little bit over time. That will be an extremely unpopular thing to do, but it's possible. Another big one that people aren't paying attention to here, the government also released a report on Medicare's solvency on Tuesday. It projected that the hospital trust fund, which is Part A of Medicare, it's like the biggest part, will have enough revenue to pay all its bills only until 2033, just a year after the same situation that's happening with Social Security, after which it would also need to reduce benefits. It's another, like, we're talking about Social Security an awful lot, but Medicare's running out of money too. And that's the money for that's their hospital trust fund, and they're going to end up having to pay out less. Now, maybe people are still going to get the services because the government's going to tell them that they have to give the services to people that are on Medicare, which is something that they already do, Medicare and Medicaid. The hospitals will make up that shortfall by raising the prices elsewhere. That'll be the thing that happens there. Or they're going to raise the payroll taxes even more to try and cover this thing. So that's what's about to happen. Another issue here with back on Social Security. This is something I did last year when we were talking about this. The benefits have gone up a lot that they're paying out to people. This was not meant to be something that you lived off of. When it first started, this chart here goes back to 1940. Your benefits payout in 1940 terms was $271 a year. That's what it was. Comes out to about $6,000 today is what they're paying out. It was not enough for you to live off of for the year. It was not your retirement plan. It was basically just trying to make sure you didn't end up on the street or that you didn't starve to death. It was about what they were doing. And it was for a very small amount of people. But now it's turned into like a full-blown retirement plan. It's supposed to pay out enough for you to just live off of and to live for 20 years instead of living for a shorter amount of time at the time that Social Security started. And that's just not going to work without taxes being drastically increased to keep paying for this. It's gone from $6,000 in today's money up to over $23,000 now a year. Very different from what it used to be. Not as intended at all. And this is It was Clark is saying in here, I'm trying to look back at some of the comments in here. Like, this is a welfare program. That's what we have. It's paying out more than it's taking in. They screw people over by taking this money and not having them invest it privately, and them not even investing it privately over that time. Not that I would love for the government to be investing a bunch of money into the market, because then they get to pick who they're investing in, and that's going to have all kinds of corruption involved with it, just like we have with all the pension systems and stuff around the U.S. They screw people over big time. People paid into this, and there's not enough money to pay back out. You know, that's the situation that we're in. The chart I have right here is another one that I made, chart just from a spreadsheet I was working with. The red line is how much we're paying out. The green line is how much is coming in. The histogram or bar chart in the background is the amount that is in the trust fund. So as we started to have surpluses, they put those in a lockbox. Okay. And over time, that number got built up. It hit its peak in 2020. So we started building that up, and throughout all the history of Social Security, we built up that trust fund, and it hit its peak in 2020. And now it's going to take us 12 years to deplete what we built up since Social Security started as like savings for this situation. Now, if they had taken what was in the trust fund and invested that privately, it would have lasted for like another 10 years or so, but still would have been depleted eventually. After 2020, a lot less people on payrolls, less money coming in, people retiring earlier, leaving the workforce, deciding to take their Social Security. That happened. Massive payout increase, cost of living adjustments happened after all the inflation that we had in 21 and 22. And so this has been accelerated. And there is one thing that people will say, well, they've been stealing money from the trust fund. I get that. I totally get that. There's not like evidence for them stealing money. They borrow from the trust fund. And in fact, borrowing from the trust fund has kept it going for a little bit longer because there's interest earned off of borrowing from the trust fund. So they'll like sell the bonds and get paid back with interest basically off of this trust fund. And those interest payments have, I think, bought like another 10 years or so of solvency. Of course, the downside is I'm talking about this earning interest and like, who do you think paid the interest? We paid the interest. That's the answer. Maybe some other countries, if they were buying bonds, stuff like that. Some other people, you know, I guess they paid some interest on it. But it was a treasury borrowing from it. So the interest got paid back out of the treasury, which just comes from our stolen money. So what's the point of all of this? Yeah, something's going to have to be done about it. I hope Mike Johnson is serious about doing something about it, but as most of us listening right now know, this is probably just kicking off the midterm campaign. Look at all the great things we'll do once we finally have control of the House and the Senate and the White House. You know, we just weren't. In fact, we kicked out the guy who wanted to cut spending this year, and we decided to spend more money, and we're spending more money than we ever spent outside of the real bad COVID years. You know, we got a $2 trillion deficit, but if we get reelected after these midterms, that's when the real changes are going to happen for sure. Now, when it comes to the entitlement spending, what's more likely going to happen is they won't do that, but someone will have to do that in the next presidential administration and Congress, starting in 2028, that term, 2030, that congressional term. People will have to do something about it at that time. I think it's more likely, if they were to win in 28, that they would kick that can down and say it's too dangerous for us to do this coming up to a presidential election. That's just too much. We can't handle doing that. But we're definitely going to do it this time, starting as soon as the next president comes in. That's why it's very important that you guys elect a Republican and that we get even more Republicans in Congress. And there could be an argument for that. You know, they don't have a filibuster-proof majority as they've decided to keep their zombie filibuster. So there can be an argument for that kind of thing. Someone's going to have to do something about it, and he shouldn't get mad. Like, the boomers shouldn't get mad. The old people shouldn't get mad about this. There's more money going out than's coming in. That's the answer. You're in a Ponzi scheme. You were you weren't really lied to because you weren't there when they started this thing, but it was never going to work. This is going to go down on a list of failed government programs. Eventually, it's just going to be a big welfare program that we're borrowing money to fund. That's what's going to happen. And we're going to have to get some people eventually that are serious about fixing this. Like, if we are going to vote our way out of this, the people will have to wake up and realize that something really has to be done. The government has to spend less money. The government has to do less things. It's not just cutting waste and fraud or cutting off the illegal immigrants or whatever that's going to solve the problem, or cutting off California or whatever that is. Sure, there's a lot of waste and fraud out there. It's not enough to solve the problem. The U.S. government has to do less things. Not less fraud, not less waste, less programs, less spending. It's got to happen. We cannot continue to have these massive deficits and keep funding them with borrowed money and then complain about the interest rates being high and complain about inflation at the same time. You're going to get one or the other. So the people are going to have to wake up and realize what has to be done eventually. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Hit like, hit subscribe, share this with a friend if you think they need to hear it. Really appreciate everyone hanging out. Go to the Fed Haters Club, link in the show notes so you can hang out with us during the show. Got a bunch of comments in there. And I've been trying to keep up with them. It's a little bit more difficult when I'm here by myself, but I've been trying to keep up with comments. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Do all the stuff that I just said to do. And if you do every single galldarn one of them, we will be back tomorrow. Until then, have a good day and a good morning, Liberty.